Happy Friday, poddies. I am trialing something new, something exciting. I am pre-recording intros with our guests, which I'm really excited about. And it's actually taken me a really long time. I want to talk about why I made the decision before I bring in today's amazing guest, which I'm super excited about. We literally just wrapped up the interview and it was awesome. You know, when you have that interview, I'd actually pre-recorded an intro beforehand that then I listened back to after doing the interview, and I was like, nah, it wasn't the best intro now that I've actually had the conversation. So it's taken me a while to get round to pre-recording intros before I jump into episodes with guests. And I don't know why I didn't do it before. And in all honesty, I don't know whether I will do it forever, but I wanted to trial it because sometimes there are so many things I want to say about somebody that I don't ever get to say during the interview, because we end up having these really interesting conversations and it's really exciting and I get completely carried away. And then when I walk away afterwards, I'm like, oh crap, I wish I'd said that instead. So I'm going to trial this idea of pre-introducing people, doing it pre-recorded, having the lovely Scott and Jesse hash it together so it sounds awesome, and being able to just share a little bit more about why I'm bringing certain people on the show, because I think that's sometimes really interesting, and it's really interesting background before we actually go into the episode. So without further ado, today's guest who is coming on is genuinely one person that I see as an absolute leader and a thought leader in this space. And there's somebody who has spent their career working out how they can be better, how they can future-proof ideas, how they can future-proof their career. They have been on numerous TEDx stages, which is phenomenal, have written for publications like the Harvard Business Review and Forbes and multiple industry journals regularly. And during the interview today, we actually even get around to talking about how they've written over 500 blogs. Seriously, 500 blogs. I think I managed about 12. Managed about 12 before I gave that up. So today's episode really is all about this idea of whether or not we really want to stand out from the crowd, or whether we're looking to do something different for our businesses, and how we can actually future-proof our own ideas, master our skills, and really understand what it is that we want to bring to the world with our businesses and how we want to monetize that. So I really hope you enjoy today's episode. Please join me in welcoming the amazing Dorie Clark to the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. Okay, guys, so you know how excited I am about this interview, and today we are welcoming, obviously, the lovely Dorie Clark to the Smart Leaders Sell podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited about this. So I literally spent, I don't know, a good 2 hours today just binging some of your TEDx talks because I haven't watched them in a little while. And in fact, I seem to have missed out on the how to future-proof your career TEDx, and I was like, I don't know how this has happened to me, but I started watching it and I started thinking, oh my goodness, this is so interesting, because in a world where we're building this era of personal brand businesses, it's future-proofing. This idea of future-proofing has become really important to us, and I'd love to hear how you kind of not coined this term, but how you got into this idea of how can people future-proof themselves as personal brands, and how does that work?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think one of the things that I have certainly observed, as many people have probably seen experiences, is that one of the big shifts in the business world over the past 20 or 25 years has been the increased move toward, you can say the gig economy. I put that in air quotes. It's not my favorite term because I feel like in many ways it kind of connotes Uber drivers, which is not really what we're talking about. But nonetheless, there's this increased tendency among everyone, including white collar knowledge workers, to be shifting around more. You know, you're not spending your entire career at the same company. And so therefore, the attitudes that went along with that in the past, if you were at one company, oftentimes they would essentially have a kind of paternalistic way of doing business where they would be in charge of your professional development. They would, you know, provide all the information, teach you all the things you needed to know, and then move you along in your career progression like an escalator. And that is not the case anymore. You cannot just ride the escalator. And some people think you still can, and then they get mad or freaked out when that is not the case, and they find themselves stagnating on a given stair step, and they're like, you know, WTF, why am I not advancing? And it is really important, I think, to equip people with the knowledge and information that no, this is not how it works anymore. This is not how the game is played. People need to take much more responsibility, much more agency for their own careers. And on one hand, that can be annoying because you have to be thinking about it and doing it. On the other hand, it can be quite liberating because instead of just, you know, marching in lockstep up a progression that frankly may not be of that much interest to you or may not be exactly what you want, you can really be very precise in aiming now toward what you want to do and where you want to do it, but you have to take that initiative. And so a lot of the work that I do is aimed at arming people with the knowledge and the information so that they are able to do that, so that they can really provide for themselves and know how to do it, so that they are not left behind, and so they can create a career that is the career that they want.
I love this because you've been able to do this in lots of different ways. So, and I talked about this in the intro, you know, you've been able to communicate some of these amazing ideas across platforms that other people, quite frankly, would give a left arm for. You know, I'm saying a left arm because I'm a righty, so I wouldn't give up that one. But, you know, you've been able to communicate this on these amazing platforms. You know, you've got these incredible books, all 4 of which sit on my bookshelf, just as an FYI. I'm that kind of fangirl. You know, you've been on the TEDx stage multiple times. You write for Harvard Business Review, and people out there are probably thinking, well, of course it's easy for you to say future proof because you've done all this amazing stuff and you have this amazing pedigree when it comes to the achievements you've been able to make. So how is it starting out that people can really take this agency and ownership over what they want to achieve and actually go ahead and make that happen?
Yeah. Well, I think that an important point to raise, and something that that I like to make sure that I share about my story, is that whatever quote unquote social proof I have been able to accumulate has been done extremely deliberately and with great effort, because it is not something that would have organically accrued to me. You know, now I do have good credentials. I teach business school for Duke University's Fuqua School of Business. I've taught and lectured around the world. I've written these books. You know, these are all good markers of credibility. But I not only don't have a PhD, I don't have an MBA. I have literally never taken a business class. I went to a liberal arts school. We did not have business classes to take. So I've never studied it. I figured it out on my own. I built a consulting practice, which is, you know, now a 7-figure consulting practice. And when I started, I literally just didn't know any business people. I had been a reporter. I had worked in politics. I had worked in nonprofits. Those were the people that I knew. They were the people that could hire you for like $25 an hour. And so you had to really kind of get there from the ground up. And so that is part of what animates the work that I do, the lecturing and the writing and the speaking, is because, you know, sometimes, you know, when you think about coaching in any discipline, people for whom things come very naturally, it can be hard for them to be a coach because all they can really say is, well, like, you know, just do it, just like do the thing. And they don't know how to be more articulate about it because they have just somehow miraculously grasped it. But for me, I had to really be hyper strategic about how to move into these areas, how to develop these skills, because they were things that I did not come pre-equipped with. and had to build them. And so I'm very interested in helping other people figure out how to crack that code as well, because it is important. It is, of course, important to build credibility and social proof, but there are certainly ways to do it without what people would call the usual path.
Mm-hmm. And I think that word is so almost catalytic for me. I don't even know if catalytic is a word, but we're going to roll with that, right? Usual. It's one of those things when people say the phrase business as usual to me, that always sets me on edge, because for me, if you're doing something as usual all of the time, you're not growing, and therefore you're becoming stagnant. You get comfortable in that space and nothing changes. So I think that idea that you can take something off of the usual path and make it work for you is really simultaneously exciting, but also terrifying for people. Because when you do something different, you kind of put yourself on a parapet to be judged. And I think a lot of people find that quite difficult in this world of social media marketing, for sure, when people can instantaneously reach out and say, I don't like your book, or I don't like your thought, or I don't like what you just said. How do you feel like people could stand out more with their ideas, do things that are not on the usual path, without necessarily worrying so much about this idea of judgment and rejection?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, obviously, I think, for a lot of people, because, as human beings, as social animals, no one likes to have somebody come at you. That's not a pleasant thing under any circumstances. But I think that the important thing, at least for me, has been to realize, and it literally is true. This is not like a thing that people say to make you feel better. It literally is true. The people who have the time to criticize you, to criticize a stranger, are the people who are not doing things themselves. Mm-hmm. Because people who are doing things themselves, like, I mean, is Malcolm Gladwell sending trolling tweets to people? Like, wow, that was such a dumb article in the Somerville Journal. I can't believe you wrote that. Like, is Malcolm Gladwell doing this? President Obama doing that? For like, oh, I didn't like your blog post, that sucked. Like, Jesus Christ, no, of course not. There are people who actually have a life. There are people who are doing something. It is the people on the sidelines that are all like, I could do that better, and like, come on, okay, show me, great. I can't even think in my life about people that are successful authors that send nasty messages to people about, oh, wow, I hated your book, because they know what it takes to write a book, mm-hmm. And not everything's going to be to your taste. That's okay. But you respect the effort. You respect the fact that the person is in the game and is doing it. And so the people who are, I mean, it's almost tautological. The people who are sending the critical messages or whatever are, by dint of doing so, marking themselves as losers who don't have things going on. And if I am going to let myself be sidelined by those people, I mean, all hope is lost, right? I'm happy to engage. Like, I'm not going to let somebody get away with sending a message to me that's a nasty message. Like, I will fuck them back. But, but I'm not going to let it stop me. No.
Yeah,
and I wish more people felt that way.
Yeah, I really love that. And I love the fact that you were like, yeah, those people are losers. And I think it's good that, you've kind of just categorized it, because I think so many people are worried now about saying something that people won't like. We're like, oh, we don't want people to be offended. Now, as a millennial, I apparently am supposed to be offended by everything that everyone says, right? I'm the generation snowflake. And that's fine. Like, I guess I can, cope with that label. But I think it's so interesting how now, and I see so many people, specifically women, who they come out of corporate, they come out of big conglomerates, they are working really hard, they're putting in tons of effort, and they never want to say, do you know what? Fuck off. Like, if you don't want to do the work, that's cool. But I'm over here and I'm in my lane and I'm doing my thing. And I think it does take a certain element of self-confidence, but also I think it takes, it takes putting up with the bullshit for longer than you would like in certain elements, right? You put up with it. And then eventually you're like, no, do you know what? I'm done. It's fine. I'm just going to respond in the way that suits me.
Yeah, I think another important point, honestly, is that I think people often overstate the amount of criticism that they will receive. it's very rare that you receive criticism. I mean, obviously, if someone is like a global international celebrity, I mean, you know, poor Kim Kardashian, everybody makes fun of her, but you know, I mean, just, you know, everyone in the planet knows her name also. But if you are somebody that is looking to come up in your field, you know, oh, you do management, oh, you do health and wellness, like, you know, you are almost certainly not going to be a Kardashian level brand, certainly not right away, maybe not ever, you know, that's just like the, you know, the one in a billion kind of scenario. So it's a much smaller pool of people that are seeing it. The problem is that there's not going to be any response for a long time. It's not that you're going to get 20 people a day saying you suck. It's that you're going to have nobody reading your stuff, and that is demoralizing. That's the part that you really have to get comfortable with. I think that if you can master that and understand that, you know what, it's going to take a really long time. It's always going to take longer than you want it to for people to start noticing. That's really the biggest emotional hurdle. It's only later. I mean, frankly, it is a sign of success if people start trolling you, if they think it's somehow worth it. But those people are extremely rare. I mean, I would say, I mean, obviously psychologically they have a bigger impact. I mean, we all know from studies of psychology that whatever negative thing, you know, is kind of like a 5x emotional shockwave compared to somebody saying something nice. But nonetheless, I mean, it's probably, I don't know, like a 50-to-1 ratio, or a 30, you know, at least a 30-to-1 ratio, probably 50, you know, that like people sending me nice notes versus somebody sending a snarky note, you know, so it's very rare.
And I think it's interesting as well, because like you're saying there, it can really stop people actually going out and taking any action. You have to get really comfortable with the fact that if you don't put yourself out there to potentially get trolled, you are, you know, making sure that you limit the amount of people who can really be impacted by the work that you do. Denise Duffield Thomas, a few months ago, she said in one of her books, she was like, I wrote down that I wanted to have this big business and I got really excited about it. She said, and then I started worrying that I would have to go and meet Oprah, and I would have to be on Super Soul Sunday, and I don't really like working on Sundays, and, you know, what if I got up there and I looked really different and blah, blah. And she was like, and before I knew it, I had convinced myself not to have this business just in case I had to meet Oprah. And I think it's so normal. Like, we all do that. We kind of extrapolate to the nth degree about what might happen if we share something that we feel is, you know, revolutionary or different, and we feel like it opens ourselves up to judgment. But in effect, what you're saying is actually, you know, you're way more likely to get such a positive response because you are the person saying it, as opposed to being trolled for, you know, standing out.
Right, absolutely.
I really like that, and I think it's so interesting. So I think a follow-on for me from that would be this idea of perseverance. One of the things that comes up quite a lot in the case studies that you use and the examples that you talk about is overnight success not being a thing. And I think we're both laughing. So I think one of the things that I see in the online industry is that people, they kind of have this expectation that day one, they're going to set up their business, and day two, they'll have made $1 million. And, you know, if by like day 10, they haven't, then they have failed. And we've kind of created this perception and generation of entrepreneurs who really want to succeed fast. But when I look at, you know, everybody in the world who's ever been successful, of whose books I've read, you know, obviously there are some I haven't bothered. But when you look at it, the trajectory of the overnight success is actually a tiny, tiny part of the journey. And I'd love to hear about yours. You know, what for you was that tipping point from working, doing lots of research, gaining the knowledge, and then that tiny pinpoint of suddenly, according to everybody else, I'm really successful.
Yeah, I think that, you know, it is absolutely a big process. But one kind of rule of thumb that I like to share with people just to contextualize things is, for me, a lot of the brand growth that I have experienced and the benefits that come with it are a result of the content creation that I've done, specifically the blogging that I've done. And so, we all know, everybody knows, like, okay, they have heard that success takes longer than you want it to. They have heard that you have to do it for a long time. But I think that in terms of a practical application of that, people don't really fully grasp what a long time is. And so I want to really contextualize it. For me, I started in, I would say, 2010, maybe late 2010, really starting to blog aggressively. And it really began to pick up in 2011, and especially in 2012 when I started writing for Forbes. And so in this period of like 2012, 2013, I was doing between 10 and 15 blog posts per month. So it was a very, very high volume. It was a significant portion of my time that I spent doing it. But, when it comes to practical things, okay, obviously people know, like, all right, you can't do one blog post and get noticed, but I think they feel like, oh, well, by the 10th, by the 50th for sure. And the actual truth is that for me, the measure that most people, they don't necessarily state it, but I think what they really are meaning by success is unsolicited inbound inquiries for work, for consulting, for something like that. And so what is the amount that gets people to come to you specifically as a result of your work? And for me, and for a lot of the people that I coach and have worked with, that number is actually somewhere between 200 and 300 blog posts, or whatever your equivalent medium is, podcasts or what have you. So it was 2 to 3 years and about 200 to 300 blog posts before I began to get really even a noticeable amount of inbound inquiries. Now, the trick is, once you get beyond that point, it really becomes a kind of virtuous circle. It becomes self-perpetuating, and you get a lot more. There's a real inflection point because most people have not bothered to get to that level of frequency. But that's the hard part. You are doing things out in the wilderness for a very long time where you feel like other people may not be paying attention or listening, and you have to keep doing it. That is the test of your entrepreneurial mettle. But if you can do that, if you can get to the other side of that chasm, there are great rewards.
And I think that's really interesting because the founder of Real Men, Real Style, Antonio, he said a few months back that he's a YouTuber. So his whole platform.
I profiled him in Entrepreneurial You, actually.
Amazing. There we go. See, small world. So I met him. We were both speaking together at Udpreneur in 2018. And when we were talking, he said, like, your first 100 videos are going to be crap. And he said the same thing on the stage. And I hadn't thought about how important that was until he said it again on the stage. And he showed everybody a visual of the thumbnails that he'd created this first 100 videos. And he was like, for the first 100, I just expected them to be shit. I wasn't expecting them to lead anywhere. And he was like, and that's what I tell people now. And for me, that was so interesting and inspiring because so many people who listen to this podcast are they're almost at the tipping point. Maybe they've gone out, they've created 100 episodes of something, but they feel like the rewards should be there now. And they're kind of thinking, do I hold out? You made a really interesting point about some of the podcasting research that you'd seen from Josh between 2005, 2015 about this. There were 206,000 podcasts out there. And people were thinking, well, why should I go and set up a podcast? And when he went back and analyzed it, there were, most podcast hosts had only produced 12 episodes. So what is it that you think, mentally stops people? Is it this kind of, oh, well, I want instant gratification, I want it to work now, and it's not, so off I go in a huff kind of thing? Or is there something bigger that stops us moving forward?
I think it's probably a multiplicity of factors, but one very basic one, of course, is that people are often very busy and they have competing obligations, whether it's to work or families or whatever. And I think that it is very difficult to be able to tell the difference between it's not working and it's not working yet. And especially if they are not already primed to expect that it will take 200 posts or 200 episodes or something like that. They might say, well, God, it's been 100, it's been 75 or whatever it is. And if they're not seeing results, they might say, well, tried that. And it may in fact make logical sense to them with that frame to give up because they have other things that they can spend the time on that they feel like have a more immediate return. That's one. I think another, which I'm really discovering more and more, which is harder to wrap your arms around or really to know what to do with. But I do think that a lot of people, for probably various reasons, have self-esteem challenges around this, about kind of raising their hand, raising their voice, etc. I've done these 3 books, Reinventing You, Entrepreneurial You, and Stand Out. And I didn't understand this at the time. I didn't expect this at the time. But, out of these, my big sellers have been Reinventing You, because everybody wants to reinvent, and Entrepreneurial You, because everybody wants to make money. Nobody really wants to stand out. And I didn't get that. I'm like, fuck yeah, I'll stand out. But some people really, really are uncomfortable with that idea. And it's like, it is something to be reckoned with.
And I think it's really interesting because, I remember reading a story, it was probably in Cosmo or something, let's face it. It's going to be some US magazine that I read on the regular. But I remember reading an interview with Beyonce, who said, I have this alter ego, Sasha Fierce. And when I go out on stage, it's not Beyonce, like Beyonce's chilling at home, but I'm out on stage and I'm Sasha Fierce. And I remember thinking, oh my goodness, this is amazing. Because at the time, I was in my corporate job, and when you go into specific meetings, you'd wear like the bright red lipstick or the super high heels, the things that made you feel really powerful, but also weirdly did make you stand out. They were the kind of inadvertent things that you felt would make you look different and feel different and therefore come across differently. And I think that's quite interesting. But I do think that idea of people always want to reinvent themselves, people always want to make money, rather than people want to stand out, that's really interesting to me, because so many people want to be doing TED Talks. They want to be making an impact. So when we hear this kind of thing from business owners, they're saying, but I want to make this big impact in the world. And it's interesting then that really the resources they're picking up are about reinvention. So do I have to become somebody different to be successful, or how can I monetize what I already have?
Yeah, absolutely. And your point about Beyonce is a great one. Actually, a guy who I profiled in Entrepreneurial You, speaking of Entrepreneurial You, Todd Herman just came out with a book a couple of weeks ago called, The Alter Ego Effect, where he talks about this. So it's an interesting point.
It's so good. It's so good. So tell us about Entrepreneurial You, because I know that we have a lot of listeners who have been absolutely dying to consume this book. And I promised that we would talk about it on the podcast, and that I would ask you what your favorite case study was from Entrepreneurial You.
Oh, goodness. Well, the basic premise of Entrepreneurial You is it is essentially a book about how to create multiple income streams in your business. And I wanted to write this because I wanted to learn more about how to do that myself. I had over time come to believe ideologically that it was an important thing to do to diversify your income streams. Certainly entrepreneurs have that to a certain extent. It's not one paycheck from one employer, but if you have X number of clients, whether it's 5 or 15 or 50 or 500, whatever, if you're doing the same thing for each of those people, you are still essentially subject to disruption. I mean, if you were just a professional speaker, for instance, and all of a sudden, if there's a big 9/11 style terrorist thing where people don't want to fly anymore, if there's a big recession, well, what gets cut? Well, conference budgets get cut. And so it's risky. And so you may want to diversify, not just to hedge against risk, but to give yourself new opportunities to make money in different ways from your intellectual property. So I wanted to explore that. So in writing the book, I very consciously was, scratching my own itch, trying to answer questions that I had about different ways that one could earn money. So each chapter basically is an examination where I interviewed people, about 50 in total, who were making very, very good livings, 6 and 7 and 8 figures from these different things, these different channels. So there's a chapter about how do you make money from blogging, or how do you make money from podcasting, how do you make money from online courses, or building online membership communities, all these different types of variations. And so I would say, in terms of a practical effect, one thing that I had as a particular goal when I wrote this was I especially knew I wanted to do stuff with online courses. And so I'd say that I especially found the chapter valuable about that. I interviewed a number of people, my friend Jason Van Orden. I interviewed a good friend named Danny Eni, who I have subsequently become an advisor to his company. So we're good pals. But from them, I learned a lot about their methodologies for creating online courses. And I, in fact, ended up in 2016 launching a pilot of my own course, which is called the Recognized Expert course. And we've now been doing this for 3 years and have built up this, really fantastic community of several hundred people who have been through the program, very talented professionals who are all committed essentially to a joint project of platform building. They want to get their ideas out there in the world, and they know that they need to build their brands in order to do that. And so the course walks them through how to become a recognized expert in your field so that you can have your ideas heard more widely.
I think that's really interesting. I love what you said there about you've had several hundred people and numerous iterations, because in the online course space, actually what tends to happen is most people sell it once and then they go, oh, well, I perhaps only got 20 people or I only got 50 people, so I'm just not going to run that again. And I think it's such a shame because, 90% of my business is run through automated funnels. So they're all things that I've run live at some point, perfected, and then I've put them to different types of traffic to get people moving through. And people often ask, well, how can you make a funnel really successful? And it's not about making the funnel successful. It's all about exactly that, the product, perfecting the product, making sure it gets the right results, running it, testing it, tweaking it. And then you can put it towards whatever traffic you want. And then it automatically converts better and it automatically is more successful because you've given it every opportunity to be. I think that's a really, really interesting point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that having a quality product, of course, is really essential. And with online courses too, one of the things that of course is key is that there's lots of different price points for these things. So the Recognized Expert course is a flagship course. It's $2,000. So you have a few hundred people in that. That's a great income stream. It does not have to be thousands and thousands of people doing it. You need a few hundred of the right people, and you've built a great economic engine for yourself.
100%. Thank you so much today. Seriously, this has been really, really interesting. And I know that our poddies are going to be really excited to take away some of this or some of these ideas around building their own brand, and whether it is that they really want to stand out or whether they have a different goal around reinventing themselves or monetizing their business differently. So thank you for sharing those. Where can they find you? Where is the best place for them to connect with you and find out more about the amazing things you're doing in the world?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jessica. Well, my website is always a pretty good hub. I have more than, at this point, we talked about content creation. I have more than 500 free articles available there that I wrote for places like Forbes and the Harvard Business Review. That's DorieClark.com. And especially for your listeners that are interested in building their businesses and multiple streams of income, folks might be interested in a free resource that I have, which is an 88-question self-assessment. It's the Entrepreneurial You self-assessment about how to build multiple income streams in your business. And folks can get that for free at DorieClark.com/entrepreneur.
Amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been epic. And I do really appreciate the F-bombs. That has absolutely made my day. So thank you for joining us. Guys, if you have enjoyed this episode, which I know that you will have, please make sure you do go and connect with Dorie directly. Make sure that you shout on social media about what your biggest takeaway was today so that we can all know how we're impacting the world differently. And obviously, if you do want to go ahead and download that self-assessment quiz, which is phenomenal, make sure you head over to DorieClark.com where you can grab that. I'll see you in the next episode.